All right, we're back. Now, we're going to change this program. We're going to create a few classes to do some of the work. In the previous video, we created this postfix service. We're going to create a new class for a node. We're going to create a parser. We're going to create one class to do the parsing of the input, this node to kind of hold what it is, and then this postfix service that'll use that to actually do the operation. Now, this is obviously contrived for the purpose of an activity for education purposes. To do this little functionality to create 4 files probably isn't worth it. This probably all should be contained in a single class. I mean, we're getting a little small with our work and a little small with our units. We always have to be asking ourselves when writing software how many things we're going to create. Because we have to remember, the more things we create, the more like integrations or connections between those things we're going to have. If we end up with too many of those connections, it just becomes a mess for people to manage. And if we've kind of followed the logical progression of what I'm doing here, we may actually end up in that world. All right, but let's go over here. We're going to continue down this. And the first thing we're going to do, add class operator. I'm saying we're going to add a class. Notice I did this. I'm a little surprised it's defaulting to that. It must be a setting or something I have wrong there. And it's created a class. And that was really because that's what I told it to do. And it also has all this stuff, which I don't like that either. We want our files as clean as possible. I told it to create a class named operator. We don't want a class. We're going to create public enum operator. Then we're going to have 4 operators for right now. Add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Enums are kind of a nice way in our software to kind of denote types. A lot of times we'll use the word like operator types with it instead of just operator. We can get into that differences as well. For right now, I'm going with the term operator. And those are the 4 versions we have. I did make this public, so someone outside this DLL could have access to it. All of that is going to be a little relevant because in a later stage, we are going to make everything accessible from the web, and we're going to make a web service that does this work. So if we're going to make a web service do this work, it's going to be a separate project, or at least I was planning on doing a separate project. Maybe we won't now I think about it. But regardless, we have this operator type. Now we're going to come in here, add class node. Again, I'm going to get rid of this. Get rid of all this gobbledygook. And I'm going to, for the purpose of this, do public struct node. Now, for this, we are going to have a constructor, node string input. And from this input, we're going to have to figure out what we want to do. Now, there is a few public properties that I want to have on this. Public bool is number. Public int number. And public operator. And we're going to look at this input, and we're going to parse this input and convert it into one of those. Now that's actually pretty straightforward. We have that code already. And so I'm going to go to this postfix service, and I'm going to kind of steal or copy what we did previously. Copy. And since we no longer have a stack, actually, that was maybe not the best use of code. Operator equals add. Now we're going to go in, we're going to add another operator dot subtract. We're going to add another operator, multiply, and another one, divide. And if we don't get one of those, we're going to do operator none. Actually, I'm going to do that, and this number is true, and that. Now, I don't actually have this, so we're going to get rid of that. That would have been maybe a good idea, but that's all right. So we have this. So we can parse this in, and that'll give us a node. The postfix service needs to change now. The postfix service we're going to call handle operation, and we're going to pass in. Ooh. We're going to change this to calculate, and we're going to pass in node and we're going to do a list of nodes. Could do an array. That also would have worked. Actually, I'm going to leave this in here for a second. I'm going to just comment it out for this little bit here. Print stack, I don't even know if we'll have. I don't know if we're going to have any of these. How do we want this to behave? Actually, I think what we're going to do is we're going to return a string. Okay. And what will that string be? That string we're going to return var output equals, and we're going to do while and we'll just do put a space between each number on the stack, and then we'll return that output. After we do that, we're going to get rid of both of those methods. All right. And now we need a parser. Now for this first phase, we're going to keep this really straightforward. We're going to do a very, very simple parse. And we're going to create a new service new class, And you'll notice I tend to use the word class and service somewhat interchangeable. We tend to do a lot of what we refer to as service-oriented programming or service-based programming. We like to have very rigid services that live behind a contract. And so you're getting a little bit of that feel that I am tending to use that term. Services in our world tend to be classes, but they have an interface in front of them. We will talk about interfaces in a later video, but you'll notice that I'm kind of using those two terms a little interchangeably. But we're now going to create a new class called ParserService. Again, I really hate how it kind of does that. We'll do this. And we're going to do this. What is this doing? Well, some very basic code here. We take in an input, which is a string, just a bunch of characters. And then we're going to split those on space. And we split those on space, and for each one of those items, we create a node and add it to our node list. And then we return that node list. This is probably too basic to be its own class. Again, for education purposes, we're making things pretty small. This isn't a lot going on here. But, again, I kind of wanted to show some different things going on here. So we have this parser service, we have this postfix service, and we have our program. All right, so this no longer functions the same way. We now read a line of characters. And I'm going to leave this code in here. So we're just going to keep doing this as long as people input a line of characters. I'm also going to get rid of this. Get rid of this. Actually, since we're doing it here, I'm going to do this actually inline here and create a new one each time we call it. Sometimes people like to think of their being efficient and reusing things in software. In general, any sort of sharing we do while writing software is probably not going to help us. So we're going to create a new parser service, and then for that parser service, we're going to pass in the inputs, and that's going to give us a list of nodes back for that postfix. And then we're going to call our postfix service, and we have a method on it called calculate. And we're going to pass in those nodes. This is going to give us var output, which is going to be a string. And we are going to then dump that output to the console. All right, I want you to now, and I think it'd be a good time to see if you can take this and modify it to finish out this implementation of postfix service. And in a later video, I'm going to come in and we'll kind of show the result, how to go from this and fixing it or making it work. You know everything you need to know to do this. This is a good starting point for playing with things. But go through and create this. Kind of finish that calculate method out. You're going to have to use some loops. You're going to have to look at some of the structures. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but do this, and in a later video, we'll come in and look at the result.